It's another beautiful black t-shirt
Not
day.
today. The streak is
No?
over, Zach.
Oh,
This is blue.
wow.
It's spring,
Colorblind.
changing things up a little bit. Yeah.
I have a hard time. Like dark colors all look the same to me. I am red, blue, red. I'm some sort of colorblind. My mom doesn't believe me. There'll be a bunch of trees and they're like two colors, light green, dark green.
Mm.
And then whoever I'm with, there's like, no, there's like 3,000 colors there. And I'm like, I only see two. So your shirt actually, now that you mention it, it does look a little dark bluish, I guess. But I guess I'm just in that habit of thinking about you wearing black tea on this.
Yeah, that has been, we've been doing that for quite some time. But yeah, I was just like, today we're just going to change it up. So
I appreciate you changing it up. That's what I like to see. Break a streak. It's all good.
That's right.
You have not met today's guest?
Nope.
Okay.
Have not. And these are my favorite shows because I get to learn about a new business, a new person, a new story. Do you know Jen?
I met her less than 10 days ago, let's say.
Oh.
Yep. But surprisingly, we had one conversation sometime in the last 10 days. I believe in the last 10 days. And during it was kind of wild that not that I go to Richmond a lot, but I used to go maybe 3-4 times a year to do something up there. And surprising that we had never crossed paths in any of the things that we done. And maybe we were in the same room, we just didn't realize it, but
it's really surprising. With how small this town is and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I am very surprised. Very.
Yeah, because and I run around the circles quite often as well. Yeah. Well, welcome to the show, Jen.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Zach. Glad to be here. So it's and it's crazy. We're just down 64. I was going to offer to come down and do this live. It just would have been fun.
Well, she said that, and I said, we did one live show once, and it was an absolute disaster. Right? It was mighty dream and trying.
We couldn't control anything at that point. Yeah, that was a big production within itself. That was Pharrell's thing that he did.
Yeah.
So we
still would have had to have brought in cameras. There was all those things. Like it's not. Yeah. This makes it a lot easier.
It does
doing it the other way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now you can just stop recording if I start to say anything.
Well,
have you ever had to do that? I'm so curious as at podcast hosts, if you've ever been like, all right, conversation just took a direction that we're like, yeah, we gotta.
We've had a couple.
We encourage that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Zach and I we've gone down memory lane a time or two, but like the one that stands out to me anyway is when we were recording. We do everything live, and we don't edit anything out. And then someone's lawn care person started either mowing or do edging or something right outside of his window. And next thing you know, we didn't really even know what was going on. And he jumps up out of his chair and chases that person down.
I've had my husband do that when I'm doing a presentation online. It was during the COVID days, literally my husband was outside, he gets very excited with the blower, went out there and I was like, and everybody on the screen couldn't hear it. That was the issue. Nobody could hear it except for me. So I was completely rattled trying to sit in my little COVID space and pretend like nothing else was going around.
It is interesting what the microphone picks up.
So I'll say the same thing.
I'll be on a walk and I'll call my mom. And she's like, oh, I hear the birds or I'll hear this. And I'm like, I don't hear a damn thing.
So focused. You can't hear a lot and you can't see colors. There actually are definitions. There's actually
she asked if we were going to kick someone off the show, and she might be the first one for that. That's okay.
I'm just teasing. So back to why we should have known each other. I've heard about that. Right. I think what you guys have been doing down in 757 and just the entrepreneurial ecosystem and kind of the early days of Hatch. that's where like we can talk about my business and kind of how I got into being an entrepreneur, but I think kind of the core of where we really probably could start conversations and being connected is just the difference in kind of how the regions within Virginia are so different and the challenges within 757 versus Central Virginia. Yeah, so that's really where we should have crossed paths, because I have been involved. I started angel investing back in 2009 with a group called New Dominion Angels. I was working at Capital One at the time and just started to immerse myself in all things entrepreneurship in Richmond. Because that was really more my philanthropic passion, was figuring out how to help and what could I be doing in my local economy to make things grow and for things to flourish. And so, yeah, so I've been on a journey of trying to figure out how to help this ecosystem for a long time, which is ultimately why. Yeah.
I'm surprised we weren't in meeting. Like, I've been to a couple of those meetings before, so maybe we have been in the same room, but
we just didn't. Yeah, we weren't introduced. Yeah, we weren't introduced.
Yeah, typically at the when that happens, the groups are so large that you don't get a chance to mix and mingle with everyone in the group. Anyway, but because I've been to Richmond several times, and we've had groups from Richmond come down several times.
Well, and now you have our Paul Nolde down there. So, you know, the transfer of knowledge is starting to happen more and more, which is exciting. You guys know Paul, right?
It sounds like you're angry at that. Like, is Richmond sad?
No, I wouldn't say Richmond was sad. Oh, no. I think, compared to where we started, we're sad that we lost Paul, yes, because Paul's an amazing resource in our community. But at the same time, for the state of Virginia and for the 64 corridor, I think it's amazing, just because of the network and kind of increasing collaboration is really critical. And I think both of our ecosystems are so different. We both have our challenges, but they're really different. But there's a lot of cross-pollination, I think, that can happen across the groups.
So is this going back?
I jumped right into this podcast. Sorry.
Is this going back to like the Todd Nichols days? Is that like, or even before that?
Yeah, so the Todd Nichols days. So I moved to, big backstory. I first came to Richmond as a consultant and then went to business school at UVA. I went to Darden, and then was recruited by Capital One back in 2001. And so that's how I landed in Richmond, was with Capital One. I started out in their IT department as a systems designer. And Capital One was really, or always has been really active in supporting small businesses and entrepreneurship. And so it was about in 2009, I was the head of operations for the small business credit card division. And so really started to get involved with the small business community and the entrepreneurship community in Richmond. And then kind of that's when I also started angel investing. So getting plugged in with Lighthouse Labs in those early days, I was on the sidelines kind of cheering on and helping Capital One give money into the ecosystem. So so I was around from there. And then what I loved about Capital One was the way that they did their philanthropic giving. Was they would Mike Wasmer was the president of the Richmond region in Central Virginia and the market president. And so with philanthropic giving, he would assign executives to determine kind of where should money go. And so for a couple of years, I worked with a guy named Jay Sanney, and he and I did all the grants into the Richmond ecosystem that were around innovation entrepreneurship. So we gave grants to Lighthouse Labs. Jay and I were the ones that were working with Startup Virginia when it launched and first bought the 1717 building. And Jay and I convinced Mike Wasmer and Capital One to buy that building and kind of support and elevate Startup Virginia in that space. And then I also just have been helping, trying to really, and I think this is what Zach, you and I talked a little bit about, like when you have such different groups that are really passionate about helping, how do you actually set a table so that everybody can sit at the table and have a conversation so that we're not duplicating efforts in the region? So I've been a part of the Activation Capital. They have which is the authority board for the biotech park. They have an advisory board, and I've been the vice chairman of that for almost 9 years, trying to bring people together just to figure out how to get people to collaborate more, which luckily, we got a grant from Go Virginia Region 4 to do a regional entrepreneurship initiative and kind of take that in a direction to kind of create a clarity and a shared strategy across the region. And that we just finished that in December. Which Go Virginia region are you guys? Do you know?
5.
You don't.
I believe it's
Virginia.
5.
Okay. Yes. I did not know anything about the regions until it literally the first when they kind of launched this initiative for us to kind of pull stuff together. I kept on having to ask exactly what counties are included in this region.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to ask the same thing in terms of what is included in Region 4. But
we go all the way down to the North Carolina.
You do? Oh,
So
I
I don't
just
know.
like 95 south.
It's like Central Virginia and then straight down. Huh. It's the most random. So this is where the Regional Entrepreneurship Initiative to kind of bring together all these different groups of like you've got lots of rural startups and rural businesses that need help, and then you've got New Kent, and you've got Powhatan. You have all these different groups that have such different needs, and the state looking for us to come up with a shared strategy across all of these groups. We actually ended up with 3 different strategies and pulled it together to a single story because it was
it's interesting looking at the map.
It's too diverse. Yeah, it's just too diverse to try to.
Okay, so yeah, you mentioned the 64 corridor from Richmond to let's just call it to Virginia Beach at the furthest.
Yeah,
and maybe there's collaboration going on there.
Mm-hmm.
How far is too far to collaborate? Like, what's to me, it seems like that's too far, right?
Well, I think that's determined by the entrepreneurs and, the founders and how far they're willing to travel. And clearly they're willing to drive up and down 64.
Are they?
100%.
It depends on the founder.
Yeah.
Right. And this is where, like, I would say the one thing that came really clear was like, there's, on this spectrum of like what your risk tolerance and growth tolerance is of like what you're willing to do and where you're willing to go. Right. So if you are building a business and you have plenty of business in town and, it's like Richmond is a big services type of town. So if you've got a tech enabled service, you're going to have all that you need. But my company is a prop tech company. And so I had like my customer base there are some in Richmond, but I'm willing to go anywhere. Right. Because my growth appetite and my willingness and like, I want to be a multi-market kind of, and I need to start to build out that scale. Richmond's too small for that.
I guess
really hard. So
I guess I was asking the question from it as people have mentioned about making it a mega region and things like that. And it seems like they're too far away from that perspective.
The difference though, that's more of a marketing. The marketing thing is a mega region. It's not like but I know for me, like, so Jen, I live in like Hampton, York County, or those two, and I can make it to Richmond faster than I can make it to Virginia Beach. I mean, so earlier this last week, I don't know, I was on my way to Virginia Beach to something that started at 5:30. I left at 4:00. It took me more than a half an hour, and I still hadn't made it to the bridge tunnel. I made it to the last exit before the tunnel. I just turned around. I was like, sorry, I'm not gonna be able to make it because it was going to take me an hour and 45 minutes to get there. So, and I can make it to Richmond in an hour, but.
Yeah. Zach, I think, one of the other questions that I hear a lot of people when I think, Tim, you're right, like the marketing of a mega region to attract people, because that's what I would say about Richmond. I'm like, guys, I'm so close to the beach. I'm so close to DC. I'm so close to the mountains. I grew up in Cincinnati, lived in Chicago for a while, but like, I love Richmond, right? It's a great place to live. Like I'm about, a couple minute drive to the river so I can paddleboard with my kids. And it's, easily accessible, but the marketing of the mega region versus, I think this question of where do we need to collaborate? Where are those connections? Like collaboration versus all of us have unique talents and skills in our region and different businesses. So it's really more about the collaborative networking and making connections where we need to versus assuming that, anybody has, if somebody has resources, we should clearly be sharing because a lot of those are, the nonprofit types of resources that lift other people up. But for me, it's just, I'd love, like with my business and wanting to connect with other Virginia businesses, that are, in the multifamily space, right? How do I leverage the network that's in 757 to really get connections down there? Because I need a lot of companies and a lot of property management firms to kind of take a look at what we're doing and consider kind of evolving that. So I think that's where, for me, the collaboration should be more about supporting the founders and helping them navigate than because we all, as somebody who has been in the space of getting wrapped up of helping founders, you've got to keep them at the center, because if you don't, it becomes more about what you're doing and not the ultimate outcome, which is helping the founders actually succeed. And so I think that's when I think about the collaboration, is like, how do we elevate and actually help each other say, oh, wait, here's, what, Brandify, right, was one of the companies here in Richmond that is a beauty products company, right? How she had to go out and kind of network and go outside of Richmond for her fundraising and other things like that. And so it's Meg Pride. But, she came from Charlottesville and she moved into Richmond once she went through Lighthouse Labs and kind of launched her venture here. So anyway, I think it's, the more we can be thinking about what are the types of founders that are in each of our regions, what are the talents, and how do we help them elevate and get beyond? Because to be honest, like, Richmond can be pretty provincial sometimes, right? Like, when I'm going out and I'm like, I need to find a property management, like a lot of times I'll say, hey, I'm looking to meet with people that own properties. And then, have multifamily properties. People are like, oh, that's great, Jim. I know somebody. They have 600 units. I'm like, thanks. I need somebody, like, we're signing a deal right now with somebody who has 22,000, right? Wow. I think that's, that in the market, right? Just knowing the size and the regional nature of what folks are trying to do, and everybody's trying to help, but how do you get them to the next level versus just kind of the Richmond region?
22,000, is that one unit, one set of units, or that's their portfolio?
No, it's a portfolio. So it's a family office. They have 65 buildings, okay, 22,000 units.
Trying to figure out how big.
So we talk a little bit. I do want to share a little bit about my business, because it's been really fun after having been in corporate. This is the other thing of, I feel like I've now been on all sides of this spectrum, right? I spent almost 30 years in financial services, being digitally disrupted and kind of being an operator that would come in and bring technology to reimagine and reinvent kind of different parts of the businesses within Capital One. But now I'm on the other side as an entrepreneur, and it's just such a different journey. And having been an investor and kind of heard people's pitches, and now being the person who's out there raising, has been quite an experience.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that. So like what happened? How did you wake up one day and be like, you know what, I think I'm going to give this founder thing a go? And take us through that process.
Yeah, well, so it's so folks that there were multiple times at Capital One, like very early on in my career there, we were going through some restructuring, and I'd probably been there, it's probably 2005 or 6. So I'd been there about, a good 4 or 5 years. And they were doing this restructuring. I was like, oh, like, wait a second, they're going to be laying people off. Like, oh, should I try to get laid off? Because I had found myself at Capital One, and it was a great career. I loved working there. But I had never imagined myself being in banking. Like, I grew up, my dad was a pediatrician. I had to go to business school because I didn't, like, after doing consulting, I was like, I really know nothing about business. And so so when I was at Capital One, I was like, I never thought I was going to work for a huge company like this. I never thought I was going to be in banking. So it's like, I really want to go be the COO of be in a smaller company that I can kind of help grow and scale. Cause I'm a builder maker. That's the kind of stuff that I love to do. And so, but they, at Capital One, they're like, yeah, but Jen, like, you should really give this a try. There's a small business division that kind of operates on its own, and you can go be the kind of the mini COO of that division. And so I went over and I did that, and I realized how much it's like, I love working for the big guy to help the little guys through the big guy, right? It was just, I found my passion within Capital One. And so, every couple of years they would find a new opportunity for me to kind of go in and reinvent. And I 18 years later found myself as the COO of the small business bank, which did not work out as we had. So we had to shut down a lot of that. And at the end, we restructured the business, and I was like, you don't need somebody like me in this position anymore. They wanted me to stick around and do some work on fraud, but I was like, you know what, it's time for me to just rediscover myself and find something new, because I had been there forever and I just was pretty tired, to say the least. I was actually emotionally exhausted after that intensity. Capital One is a very intense place. Every year there seems to be like 3 things happening all at once. So I left in 2018. And I took some time off being like, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I am not going back to corporate America. And I am not going to be in financial services. Like, I want to learn something new. I want to just get out there and try something. So I spent a couple years figuring out how to design my life. When you're at when you've had this career and you're like, I got three kids, my daughter's in 8th grade and my twins are in 5th grade. So you know what? I need to define and design my life into something that like is the life that I now want to be living, where I can kind of be just more who I really am, and felt like I kind of in the corporate world had lost myself a little bit. And so I took 2 years. I literally experimented a lot. There's a book called Designing Your Life, where you're supposed to kind of do little experiments before you jump into your next big job or whatever you want to do. So I did some consulting with VCU Health System during the pandemic. I helped a bunch of startups. Some of the companies that I had invested in reached out, and I played some fractional kinds of jobs as they were scaling and trying to figure out when they were finding big clients and signing new clients. And I even taught at the University of Richmond for a while, because everybody's always told me, Jen, you'd be such a great professor. And I realized in teaching, I did like the teaching, but teaching is more my style than it actually is my vocation. So I love to coach people and train, work with people to learn new things, but I don't like grading. But ultimately, it was in that my co-founder, Alex Otanya's, he and I sit on a board of an advisory board for an investment fund here in Richmond, the Trolley Fund. And he reached out to me. He's like, yeah, I've got this business idea. And so I had sat down with him, and I thought he was coming and asking me for an investment. I was like, look, I'm not with Capital One right now. I'm a little illiquid on my angel and heavy on my angel side of the investing. And he goes, well, he's like, nope. He was like, I don't want you to invest. He's like, I was hoping that you would be the CEO of the company. He's like, I know you like to build and scale things. And so I picked around the idea. I did some research. So the original concept was about making smart devices and smart technology easier to adopt and to install in multifamily properties. And so I'm a huge fan. I've always been an early adopter of technology. I won't go my backstory on the technology side, but I'm a tech nerd. And I kind of the concept of like all the IoT stuff that was and kind of the devices, and they aren't really adopted at all in multifamily. So think smart thermostats, switches, and other types of things like that. But then he was also doing regression. I'm not going to say AI, but like there's a lot. He had done a lot of regression around how to automate routines and habits and things like that. But then the other side of it was using, instead of having apps, was to actually have more of that conversational AI interface. So that literally you could just text, I'm cold, and your thermostat goes up. So, but what really got me excited was seeing the real estate industry. Real estate, in terms of its digital disruption, is in the very early stages. And so as I went out and I started talking to property owners and property managers, just seeing the types of technology and the challenges of where they are reminded me of like the way back early days of Capital One when I was there. And I was like, wow, to be in an industry that's going through that type of disruption, and to be on the outside, bringing technology to not apply the technology to what already exists, but how do you reimagine experiences with the technology that's available today? And so that's where I joined Alex on the journey 3 years ago, and it's been really fun. It's been crazy.
I have a lot of questions.
I'm going to stop talking now, Zach.
I mean, I'm going to ask you to talk again. So
okay, I'll answer your question. I will answer.
I don't know that we'll get to all 3 of these questions, but
okay.
Is it fair to say you burned out at Capital One?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I know you said you took some time off and stuff like that. Burnout is a legit thing. I think everyone has it in every aspect of their life at some point, right?
Yeah.
Anything specific that you can tell us that you did to help refresh like your spirit, because you seem pretty pumped up about this new thing, but it sounds like, 5, 6, 7 years ago, you were absolutely ready to be done with that side of the world, and maybe it killed your mojo. Like, what did you do to actually get through that? Because I think a lot of people go through that even in their current business that they know that they want to be associated with, and it's a hard thing to get through for a lot of people, and just interested in deep diving into
Well, yes. I think the one thing that I found in my own pattern at Capital One was just like, it was almost, I would go in and be like, okay, I'm going into this problem with, fresh eyes, but every time I'm an empath. And so I realized, and it took me a long time at Capital One to not absorb a lot of other people's anxiety and stress, particularly as the operator, the COO, who's like bringing everybody along. When I know that things are rocky, it kind of, that's, I think, ultimately what I was letting myself absorb too much of the ups and downs of what was happening in the business. And I just couldn't shake it. I felt when they said that my role was eliminated, I knew that it was coming, because I had done it. I had been laid off before, and I always done another job, but it was in that moment where I had to say, I can't keep doing it. And it was a scary time to be like, can I literally, again, it was Capital One, so it was a very nice package, but can I walk away? And how you make that decision with my husband, and, kind of talking to him, I'm like, we're going to have to make a lot of changes. My kids were all in private school at the time. And I had to really dig deep to say, I am going to make a pretty big change in my life. One of the more dramatic things that I did was, I went with some of my best friends from college, and we hiked the Grand Canyon from the North Rim to the South Rim in one day. So I gave myself this really big challenge that got my brain to just start to let go of all of the Capital One care that I had in my heart, because I wanted to stay like entrenched. And I was like, but I want to keep fixing. And I had to be like, I have to walk away. This is no longer my problem.
Is that hike? Is that hike hard to do? Is that a big
29? This is where my kids would be like, they would be able to recite this, and my friends and I always will. We regale with stories. It is 29 miles. We started on the North Rim. You go down about 400 stories. And so you go down. You hike 400 stories down, and we started at like 6 a.m, and it was 50 degrees, 40 degrees. You get down to the bottom. It's about, by the time you go through, I forget what the name of the, just past Phantom Ranch is like 9, or right before Phantom Ranch is 90 degrees, but 29 miles. And then back up on the other side on the South Rim is over 360 stories going back up.
Wow. That's a bucket list thing. That was something that we were going to do for my son's graduation, but we had to postpone.
Oh.
Now we were very lucky because the mules were all sick. So we didn't have to worry about kind of going back up on the South Rim. So we didn't get knocked off. And it was pitch black because we finished at 9. This is my one recommendation is do not go with your college besties, 6 of you that literally just keep talking the entire time, as well as every time we got to the rest stop, a pit stop, one lady would go, we'd all just sit there and chitter chatter. And then she would come out and be like, oh, you know what, I should probably go too. So every time we stopped, it ended up taking us so much longer than we thought it should have, but it was a blast. So, but Zach,
I thought you were about to say we'd stop, have a bottle of wine, went a little too. That's where I thought we were going with this, but okay.
It's that's technically, if only, but we wore the same clothes for we had to take our bags with us, and everything that you carried with you had to basically have for 2 days. So it was mostly water, and we had lots of snacks. The planning for the snacks for that trip was kind of ridiculous. It was crazy, all the planning. But Zach, I think, now my friends were not going through the same type of transition, but I literally took that hike as I'm coming out the other side, a different woman. I was trying to make it this really symbolic, trip. I was trying to reflect. you know what I realized? I was like, it's just life. You're just going to move on to the next phase. Like literally, like I was trying to make it this like symbolic thing. And it was insightful that I was like, yeah, no, I'm just now on the other side, just like I was, and it's still me, and I'm still doing that. So that was my melodramatic way of dealing with it, Zach. But I think it took a long time. What I describe to people as detoxing, right? Like when you're so addicted to the adrenaline and being in a game and having fun and loving who you work with, but realizing that like you need to be doing something different, like it was hard. And luckily I was really, really lucky. One of my good work friends, Sarah, she left around the same time, and she and I had both been at Capital One about the same amount of time and had done some really fun work together. But she and we would go on long walks and like constantly remind ourselves of like, I know do you really want to go back? Do you really want to go back? No, we should not go back. Right. And so like holding and having that kind of accountability and reflection. And like, I always jokingly called Sarah my free therapist. I'm like, I can't go back to corporate America. Like I'm doing this for a reason. I'm going to figure something out. And that took some time, and it took a lot of support. Again, like luckily my husband he knew that I needed to do something different. And so he was just wonderfully supportive to give me the time, and I slept a lot too. I slept a lot. Luckily, I did not drink a lot. I just slept a lot. So, but yeah, but the burnout is real. I think just being able to give yourself some grace, because it happens to all of us.
Yeah, so much you hear about founders burning out, but not so much from the other end of the spectrum where you experienced it from.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting. Like I had a friend who came for my birthday party, like 52. So I just turned 52 for my 50th birthday, and so she's known me since I was in high school, and so she came to the party. She's like, "My God," she's like, "You're different. Like you as a corporate person versus now." She's like, you're just in you have a different energy. I'm like, yeah, I just feel more myself now, right? Versus fitting in at Capital One. I was not your typical linear kind of engineer analyst. And so I spent a lot of time trying to stay true to myself in Capital One and kind of being able to contribute, which I did. But now the burnout, like in terms of being a startup founder, I'm not getting burned out, but I think it's because it's just such different energy and work than it was at Capital One. People ask me if I'm stressed. I'm like, no, I'm not. I mean, it's stress, but I don't have the anxiety. I'm not dealing with the really big issues. I mean, when I was the COO of the small business bank, I had fraud, and I was responsible for any time there was a breach and had to talk to regulators, and having hundreds of people on your team when there's uncertainty around the direction. That's really, really hard work, and I loved doing it. But now I'm like, oh, I get to problem solve, I get to explore, I get to try shit, which is my mantra all the time at Capital One. I like to try things and experiment to see how to make things better, because I'm not somebody who would always say that I know the answers. I like to try new things to figure it out. And so yeah, I shouldn't say yet, I have yet to experience the burnout of the startup world. But I've had some serious intensity training when it comes to my decades.
Where is the business now, in terms of
where we are? So it's been a long journey. So we, like I said, we started out with this IoT idea and opportunity. And we still really believe in kind of this massively simplified experience for residents of multifamily. But last year we went through Lighthouse Labs. So we got into Lighthouse Labs, and we had a paid pilot. But in the first week when we did our demo, and we showed people how you could just text your apartment and the lights would go up or down, and the thermostats, everybody's like, oh my gosh, I would so much rather just text my apartment than having to call somebody or kind of taking all this other action. And so as we heard that, the whole reason I had gone into Lighthouse was like, hey, like this IoT thing is a really long sales cycle. At the time, with the interest rates starting to change, like people were not putting a lot of investments into more infrastructure in their buildings. And so I was like, well, what is the there? Like, where else can we how big could this business get? And so that was where people started to realize what our conversational AI, which, ChatGPT came out around the same time, and everybody's like, oh, that's what you guys are doing. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what we're doing. And so what we've done is really taken the AI capabilities that exist with OpenAI, just all of these models, and we've reimagined how residents and staff can engage in a building by kind of building a network of AI agents to answer questions, right? Because right now in real estate, people are taking this generative AI and applying it to what already exists, versus we've created a platform that allows for residents and for staff to ask questions. And it's not it's bespoke to the property, but it kind of integrates in with a lot of the other technologies that might exist in the building. We launched that product kind of towards the end of last year. And I'm excited to say we have, like I was saying, we have our first customer that has 22,000 units. We were able to build and train their initial model in less than 4 days and answer 100% of the questions that they asked it. So that was, for us, was great. So we're launching that right now. And we have a very big deal, actually, after 15 months of selling, a big deal on the IoT side as well. So we found product market fit, and we're starting to now get those case studies to kind of go out and show people kind of the what's possible and kind of get that rolling. So I will actually be in your neck of the woods soon, guys. It's the Virginia Apartment Management Association, the VAMA conference in April. So
I've spoken there before.
Oh, have you? What did you speak about, Zach?
I don't know. That was many years ago. I'm sure I talked about something about communication, standing out, marketing, something along that from a business perspective. I wouldn't imagine something along those lines, since that's usually what I talk about. So Alex, CTO style is what I would take it. He's a technical guy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Goes up to you and says, hey, I have this idea. I want you to be a CEO. I feel like a lot of times the story is the opposite of that, where it's, hey, I have an idea. I need to go find someone who could actually build it. It's pretty cool that he came up to you and had that conversation. Can you go deeper on that? Like, was it a quick yes? How did you guys come to the conclusion that it was going to work? What are some of the details behind that?
So I think I'm trying to.
I would imagine you having the angel investment history would help you think through that process, just in terms of wanting to dance that dance. You need the right song.
Well, and that's what I was about to say, Tim, right? I've had other people come to me, I've been advisors to a lot of startups, and a lot of them along the way have been like, oh, could you come on? And I'm always like, it's not my song, right? I'm not ready to dance to this one. But again, like I said, when I looked at what was happening in real estate and just how massive the real estate market is. And then this is, again, my own naivete of I barely got into financial services and hadn't really thought about how important banking is in the economy. But now to have that time to look at what's happening in real estate and being like, there's plenty of room to play in there. And I know that I can make, with the technology and kind of the mindset that Alex brings to the table, and very, very forward thinking. And then we brought on another partner, Bernard Harkless, who's a real estate developer here in town with Links Ventures. He's one of their principals. I was like, we can make something happen, right? We want to bring technology into this space. And so I think it was an industry that I feel like there's a ton of opportunity. It is a mission of making technology simpler and more accessible, and simplifying life. Like it's weird to be a technologist saying I want technology in the background, but that's technically kind of our mission, is how do we allow more people to benefit from and use the technology. And so I think that, that the industry, kind of the mission, and Alex is just a very generous, kind person. And he was very, he knew that like he's built and worked a very successful, his firm Shaco is really successful. He and Edwin have done a great job with that. But he wanted to really get into this, like, how do I get more into a product type of business? And so he knew that he needed somebody that likes to build and scale things. And so I figured, why not give it a try? It was the first time. That's how. Not much more than that, Zach. But to Tim's point, I was like, I can make something happen here.
Yeah. So are you looking, I'm assuming you went through Lighthouse that you're looking to raise, or you're currently raising, and that your role will then help there as well.
Yes. But this is the interesting part of it. So we got grants from VIPC, so the Commonwealth Commercialization Fund. We got a grant from them, which is great for getting us off the ground. Mm-hmm. And then after about a year and a half of kind of kicking things around and figuring out what the there is, that's when I realized, I was like, I do need to go raise some money, because I can't put my own I can't put all the risk on me and Alex and Bernard in terms of the financials for the company. And so I raised an initial round of a convertible note. And then after Lighthouse Labs launched another convertible note. So we're finishing, I'm looking to kind of close that out now. But, I think it drives a point home that I've always been really passionate about, is the importance of true angel investing in the early stages, and how difficult it is, particularly for women and just underserved minorities who don't necessarily traditionally have a network of wealthy accredited investors in their circles. Interestingly enough, like I have been very blessed, like the people that have invested in our company so far have been people that know me and are trusting that I'm going to make something happen.
Right.
But that's really hard, going to a group that doesn't know me. Sadly, a lot of the angel groups that are out there, a lot of them are really just later stage, and they're not true angels. Like I see angels. Yeah. You guys see this, right? An angel is somebody that like sees you, believes in you, and being like, yeah, I'm going to invest in that person. It might not, it might not be a 20x return. It's not about all the unicorn. This is where I'm getting so soapbox, but like all this talk about unicorns and versus just like, can't we just kind of find good businesses that are grow and they're going to scale and they're going to get acquired, or they're going to generate enough revenue to make dividends again, right? That's been the challenge for me, because if I go to these angel groups or I go to any of these funds, they're like, oh, Jen, but how big is it really going to get? Like, I'm going to be cash.
Well, at least they're thinking that way. I mean, like what I have found is it's such a cultural shift in terms of there's so much old money in Virginia that they're just so okay with, I'm just going to put it in real estate and let it grow slow and steady over time. And the risk is not as great. Whereas like having that true angel mindset in terms of, wow, what if this does work? Then how big can it get? And so many people say no, because they're just want to poke a hole into it. But, like a true angel investor is like, what if this does work? The first people to invest in SpaceX, like talk about that. Yeah. That quite literally is the moonshot. And then you're talking much, much larger than 20x returns. So at least for us, it's a real cultural shift to try to get people to think in that mindset. And we're getting there.
So we've had that a real challenge here in Richmond. I've been, like I said, I was part of New Dominion Angels, which was back in 2000. It would launch in 2009. Frank and Mike were the ones who launched it. When I was invited to that table, I was, in my, I don't know how old I was. You can do the math, but I didn't realize at the time that I could be an angel investor, right? Like Mike knew me from Capital One and from Darden. And he was like, hey, you like small businesses, you should join. I'm like, I thought I had to be an old white dude to be on that. Like, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that there was an actual like definition of an accredited investor that like, as long as you do this great, you're great, you can do this. And so that, so the but like New Dominion shut down or stopped coming to Richmond, right? It was a model, it was like an educational, like group model where they would, the founder would pitch in DC and then in Richmond, and then the members would decide whether or not to do due diligence, and then you got to opt in if you wanted to. Minimum of 7,500 for that particular for that group. But to get people to show up in Richmond, like they just they didn't have enough people coming, and so they're like, we're just going to not meet in Richmond anymore. And so Mike and Frank were like, hey, Jen, look, you can start the Angel Group yourself. Like, here you go. Here's like all the materials. You can just rinse and repeat and start your own group. But that was when I was pregnant with twins. And I was like, I can't start an Angel Group when I am still full-time working and having twins. So that's a little too much. But that's where
Did you ever go to those groups, Tim? Have you ever been to it?
Tim, did you go to those?
No, I mean, I've been to a couple 757 Angel meetings, but
because I feel like I went to a couple New Dominion Angel groups, let's say 11, 12, 13 time frame, and less than 30 people would be there. Yeah.
We're in the room together again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but you hear about, one, I just don't know how many people know about angel investing or that they're qualified. If they're not or they don't know how to manage the risks, so they stand on the sidelines. And that's where with the, I worked with the folks at Startup Virginia, to Richard and Noel, to bring Venture South to Richmond, because it's more of a social model and you can get more people to kind of like, it's educational. And I'm also sit on the board of Cav Angels, which has the same model, right? How do you make it educational, manage the risk, let people kind of put in small increments to kind of get them in there. But we still have a hard time getting people to show up for these events. I don't know. What have you guys done, like in terms of, are there other efforts besides 757 to kind of increase?
I mean, so like with me, I knew what I didn't, there was a lot that I needed to learn. And so I hitched my wagon, so to speak, to Jason Calacanis and became a member of his syndicate to try to learn. So my whole thing was, I want to read as many deal memos as I possibly can. I want to be involved in as many webinars that I possibly can. And his philosophy is much different. Whereas, that's where I'm doing my learning. So I knew that I could write a smaller check, and then with pro rata, we could double down on the winners. Whereas, so like when you were talking before, like a $7,500 minimum investment, like a few years ago, that was like 3 different times that they would come and pass the hat. Whereas like then, so like to me, the risk was a lot less. And then I could identify who those winners were. I was reading their monthly updates, saw what their traction was, and then I can continue to increase my position. Whereas like that doesn't exist around here. I mean, it's just, and the founders as well, like I'll talk to founders and I'm like, hey, I would be interested in having a slice, but like, yeah, $50,000, $25,000 minimum investment. It's like, well, all right, good luck finding that. I mean, this is not Silicon Valley or pick another location. So I think that it's a slow cultural shift.
But so one of the things that I'm scarred by is, I'm curious if you guys have seen this, is that when I, as an angel investor, put in those early days with the 5,000, later on the liquidation preferences of the big funds.
Right.
When those companies were acquired and did quite well, I got nothing back.
Yeah.
Because of liquidation preferences.
And that was, I mean, that's another thing in terms of where I'm happy that, hey, I may have a 20% carry. That's the standard. And in some of the larger firms, the carry can even be higher than that, especially if you're an LP, based on how that particular fund is doing. Whereas I know that the liquidation preference is going to be better, and I'm going to benefit with that carry. And then those are all things that like you don't know about until you're like in the thick of it and it's too late. Whereas like now, especially now in the environment we're in, all that stuff is really, really important. If you don't know about liquidation preferences, I mean, like, chances are you're about to get hosed. And
right. Well, and that's where now as a founder, right? Like,
right.
None of those people that want liquidation preferences will invest in the earliest of stages.
Sure. Yeah.
So you get caught.
Right.
You get caught in this position of, I need the angels because the later stage funds are not really, like, I don't have enough revenue, right? I don't have enough traction, blah, 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 blah. I can get all the reasons for that. I'm not going to be big enough. I'm not dreaming big enough. Blah, blah. They all have their reasons for why, right? But now how, like, luckily I have friends and kind of connections from my Capital One years and my Darden years and everything that believe that I'm going to make something happen, right? But now what do I do later? Hopefully I never get into it. But this is where I'm kind of like, do I really want to go after venture funding if I can get cash flow positive? Like, how much do I bootstrap this? Because I don't want, for those people that took the risk on me, I don't want to have to be in that position. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to think about. And I know with the different founders that I talk to, that's a big part of the conversation is, yeah, it sounds sexy to say that you're raising and yada, yada, yada. But it's like, gosh, if you can bootstrap this thing as long as you can, or if you can skip around, you don't have to make every stop that the trolley has, it's like.
Right. Yeah. That's really, and that's where I'm like, we're digging deep to try to like get into that position, because not the other thing, I don't know if it happens in 757, but like in Richmond, I would say in general in the industry, we glamorize how much money people raise, right? But like, what are they doing with it? Like, can we, like, how far, like, what is their growth? Like, and did they do it efficiently? Right. I mean, I could have burned so much cash by now, so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I could, originally I was like, let's go out and raise 2 million. I'm like, what am I going to do with it? Get an office?
What are they going? Well, ask people, like, what are they going to do with that money if they got it, right? And if they don't have an answer, then that's an interesting thing. But I used to say, like, raising money doesn't mean making money.
Right.
And so many people, it's like, hey, like, by the way, just because you have this influx of cash doesn't mean that you now magically have figured out how to make money. Like, that is not making money. Those are two different things. And people, I think that was like a shell shock moment where people didn't understand that just because they raised money, that didn't mean that they were making money. And I've started saying that, like,
it's really, and I think that's like, you see that so much. I mean, I know I've seen like people raise all this money, like, well, then what are they gonna do with it? Like, oh, we're gonna go to this big fancy office, we're gonna go do that. I'm like, as an investor, that's not where I would be.
That's a huge red flag.
It's a huge red flag.
Yeah, that's a huge red flag.
85-inch monitor, $5,000 chairs. I need the high look.
I'm sitting in my home office with my kids' arts and crafts behind me. But I can say with our contracts that we're planning like at least 250 grand, with the 3 contracts that we've got. So, that's where for me, I'm like, I'm closing this round as quickly as I can. And I want to be heads down. I want to be networking and connecting with property managers, because I mean, again, like the world of service and reimagining how we help human beings with the capabilities of AI is just, if only this had existed when I was at Capital One. We did play around a lot with AI when I was there and my teams. But the capabilities are there now. Like it's amazing. So anyway, that's my goal. I'm going to heads down. I'm at least going to pay my guys a little bit more than I am right now. That's my commitment to them, at least.
Default alive / break even. Yeah, that's the holy grail right now. You can hit that number and you're in great shape. And
we're trying.
Luckily for you, you're in the AI space, whereas it seems like everyone's just throwing that tag on there, and then
oh my god, I hate that that's how I describe it now, because it's not right. We are it's AI, but like people use I've seen people use AI just for like general technology. I'm like, if anything that's automated, they're saying it's AI. It's like, oh my gosh, that is a little over the top. We build bespoke large language models to answer questions. That's what we do. And for me, it's more about the reimagining of service and what's possible into like bringing back service and helping people and helping humans is really, to me, like this the amazing possibilities and just creating conversation. Our tagline is, give your buildings a voice. It's really about how do we leverage this emerging technology to engage with the built world in a new way that makes life easier. And
who is your target customer in terms of like within the homes? Is it for the aging population or is it all over?
Yes. To be honest, because the decision makers of this type of service, we're going after the property managers.
Mm-hmm.
And what is our sweet spot is really more of and who we really design for is like a middle market owner operator, right? Back to my example, my prized customer that's 22,000 units, 65 buildings across 6 states, right?
But
they're garden style, they're super complex. And I think this is the when I look at real estate versus financial services, the big difference in real estate is it's the built world. You can't eliminate complexity. And it's a fool's errand to try to reduce the complexity, because financial services, everything can be turned into a bit and a byte. If you have 65 buildings, you have 65 buildings.
Right.
You're not going to have all the same amenities across all 65. You're not going to have the same. And so for me, designing for that complexity, and that's where AI, large language models, the natural language processing, you can embrace that complexity and not have to standardize everything and centralize everything. And so we've designed a platform that accelerates a property manager's ability to get into and have large language models to answer questions for their staff that turn over at a very high rate, and for the residents. So it's not as much of a demographic of the resident per se as it is the type of property management firm that just is really stretched super thin and has really bad ratings in terms of service.
That makes more sense. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, I guess I was thinking more from a B to B to C play, but you are a true B2B play. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we do have to help them get onboarded and promote. Right now it's basically the easiest thing is to give them a phone number and you can text anything that you want and ask anything that you want. But we've guardrailed, and because they're bespoke, we've trained them specifically on that property. We don't let it troll the internet for answers. So we've guardrailed and kind of bringing all the best practices of AI ethics into the platform that if your team is building it themselves, they're not going to know how to do. So I've got a great AI ethicist, which who knew? You needed one on your team.
We're learning a lot about guardrails right now in terms of how that can
hallucinating
What's something you want to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I don't know. We've covered a lot.
We've covered a lot of stuff. We sure have.
Yeah. Mules at the Grand Canyon. Wasn't expecting that one. So
you weren't expecting that one?
Well, and I learned that the Earth is actually indeed not flat. So this is great.
Talking about my globe back there.
Yeah.
Gotta have the props for the kids. Back in the day when we were here during the COVID days, we would just spin that around. And the kids would drop their finger on whatever country, and then that would be the meal that the style of food that we would have to make.
Oh, that's cool.
One day that week. Yeah. It's just random. Gives them a breadth of perspective of where we are and how our small little spot in the world is the other main reason for that.
So true.
Tim,
final last words.
We covered, to your point, Zach, we covered a lot of ground, and it was an enjoyable conversation. I would love to do a second round at some point, because I would love to dive deeper into the whole AI aspect, but we'll have to.
Yeah, we probably didn't go. I probably should have gone a lot there, but I think for your audience and for, I think, just the relevant topics of ecosystems and supporting startups in our respective towns within this state are critical.
I do enjoy. I enjoy the insight from corporate angel founder aspect. There's a lot of nuggets in there. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, when you guys are in Richmond or when I'm down there, would love to connect.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's do it. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Jen.